Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
We are live. Welcome to the block, Freedom Boulevard. I'm here with the iconic couple, Tasir and Monira Abdul-Musawirs. Assalamu alaikum. How y'all doing today?
Walaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
I'm honored to have you two here. You were my first interview with how Al-Islam entering the Black community in America. It's just showing that we do have lineage here in America with Al-Islam, and we do have our own culture here, and just showing some of the stories of Islam in America. And I know some rich history. I might as well start from my root. So I'm very honored to have y'all here today.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you. Shukran.
Happy to be here.
Okay. So we're just gonna have like a little conversation, not so much an interview, but like conversation on how Al-Islam came to your life. So I want to know where were y'all born? Like born and raised that in America? Where was that at?
And so you have it on record.
Oh yeah, we live right now.
We're live.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we live right now in the studio.
All right. All right. Well, as they say, ladies first. So I'm going to let my beautiful wife, Monira, begin. And I think probably we should, I don't know, you got to watch on. We should probably give each one a certain amount of time.
Well, you could.
Okay.
It's all right. We could go.
All right,
You know what I mean? We could. You know what I mean? It's all good.
All right, I'll start. My name, Monira Abdul-Musawir, also known as Esther May Randall.
Esther May Randall. All right now.
And also known as Esther May Randall McCrae.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving on from McCrae to the Abdul-Musawir once we accepted Al-Islam.
Mashallah.
Mashallah. Born in Virginia, migrated to New Jersey, to Newark at the age of 10, 11 during that year, and raised in Newark for the rest of my years.
Brick City. All right.
Brick City, yes. And there I met my beloved husband. And there we raised most of our children. So that's my introduction right now.
Okay. VA to NJ. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay. My name is Tasir Thomas Abdul-Musawir. And like so many African-American Muslims, many of us retain a part of that former name. The name Thomas I've kept because it was given to me by my grandmother, and she was under no duress. The name, I was born Thomas McCrae, but again, as Malcolm had told us, that was our slave name, so we discard that. And the reason I didn't discard this Thomas was because, first of all, it was a biblical name from the Bible, and secondly, it was from my grandmother, who had nothing to do with the slave name. This was just a name, and I had tremendous respect for her, so I've kept that. Tasir Thomas Abdul-Musawir. And I was born in Newark in the Central Ward. By the way, the only home I ever knew was located at 80 Wallace Street in the Central Ward in Newark.
Central Ward.
Yes, and we were both born in should I tell them how old we are?
Sure.
Why not? Yeah, look great.
We were both born in 1942. During,
1940s,
during,
mashallah.
yeah, we were war babies during World War II. Yes,
Mm,
and I grew up there. At that, that's the only home I ever knew was located at 80 Wallace Street, and went to all Newark's school system. I think I spent 16 years in the Newark school system
mm,
altogether, with my elementary and middle school and high school, and then 3.5 years, almost 4 years in art school there.
okay.
Uh,
Our school.
and my family, uh, my father and his mother and their family, his sister, they had migrated to Newark at a, I think, right during the Depression. They're from Georgia, deep,
Okay, yeah.
deep southern Georgia, right near the Florida line. That was my father's family, and my mother's family. They were also from Georgia, and they all
Mm,
migrated to New Jersey. Uh, Probably at the end of the Depression, probably in 1929, 1930. I'm guessing at that. So that's
mm,
pretty much my background. So I'll let it go at that, and we'll take turns now. Let Monira
okay.
continue.
So I was just wondering, what was your earliest idea of God, or what was your family's background, the worldview spiritually of the Creator?
Okay. My I was born in the church, you can say.
Mm,
Yeah,
okay.
my mother was very religious.
What
My
what
my
denom-
dad,
what
excuse me.
denomination of church? You say church Christian. Well, what denomination?
Okay, let him ask the question. I was born in a Baptist in the church,
Baptist,
and
okay.
yes, and raised in the church all of my primary years, and my adolescent years. It was like I knew nothing about the streets.
Mm,
And when we migrated to Jersey, we just picked up, found another church, and
mm,
we were in there, seemed like 24/7. But it was a lot of activities to do in the church. And
okay.
actually, it kept us busy. So we had like the choir, the junior choir, we had the nursing guild, we had the um, ushers, we had Sunday school, we had
What was it like in Virginia? You said, were you
well,
baptized in Virginia?
oh yeah, let me get back to the beginning. In Virginia, yes, we were told that we had to declare our faith,
Mm,
by a certain age. And they had like revivals for like 2 weeks at a time. And we had to go to church every evening and sit, and they had a bench where all of those who hadn't declared their faith had to sit, and
mm,
they call it the morning bench. And my cousin and I, my mother raised my cousin, we were the same age, basically 3 months or 7 months apart. And then we were sitting there, and we would pray at home, asking God to guide us and have us join, the religion. And
and that's
and that,
Romano, Virginia?
that's in Tuano.
Tuano?
Chickahominy actually is
Chickahominy.
the
Chickahominy.
community.
Okay.
Chickahominy, but yeah, Chickahominy is near Tuano,
Okay.
Virginia. And yes, so we sat on the morning bench, and we two were the last two to accept. I was actually the last one to say I accept God, and
Mm,
we going to uh, be Christians.
mm,
And then after that, it was like, okay, the next following Sunday, we had to go and get baptized. And it was a
mm,
big old pond uh, that we had to go to. And the preacher would be standing with thigh high boots. And we had
mhm.
to tiptoe with bare feet in the water,
Yeah.
and like, that's where we were baptized. And once that happened, we were now officially young Christians.
Okay. It's a
Mhm.
beautiful story. So, Grandpa, what was the first idea of God or your family's background or worldview with a spiritual property?
Oh, alhamdulillah. My experience as a youth growing up was the total opposite. I
Mm,
never set foot in a church. There was no mention of church or God or
mm,
Jesus or anything in my home. My parents were mostly concerned with uh, gaining an advantage economically, trying to survive. Economically there
yeah.
in Newark, New Jersey, in the Central Ward. My father was a truck driver, and my mother, who had been educated in the South because she came from a educate. My father had a third grade education, and he came from a rural situation. It's a place called Iron City, Georgia, which
Mm,
he used to tell us stories about how he would used to drive mules and logs out of the swamp because that's right near Tallahassee. It's a very swampy area, and he would,
mm,
at the age of, he left school in the third grade and would uh, haul logs out of the swamp down there before
mm,
coming to New Jersey. But my mother came from a educated family. I think her uncles, they were one of them was a professor, and my mother's maiden name was Morris. And there was another family that were very close. They were closely intertwined. I think they even intermarried a family called Brown. And my mother went to a school at that time with her older sisters that was called a finishing school there in Georgia. And I
mhm.
don't have any actual facts on paper, but I do believe that finishing school became the Morris Brown was the forerunner of Morris Brown University.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah. So in my house there was nothing about religion whatsoever, none whatsoever, because my father was one of the few. I think well, on that block that I lived on in Wallace Street, there may have been one, two, maybe three or four families that were homeowners. My father was one of them. So life was all about keeping food on the table and paying the mortgage, and that was it. Now, as far as my wife mentioned that they went to church every day and lived in the church. Well, I went to church every day too, but my church was the church of the streets. I was educated by pimps. There were some prostitutes, and there were a lot of gamblers. There were number runners. There were con men, and even knew a couple of stick up men.
Mm,
And it was kind of like I was educated pretty much by hustlers, both male and female. So this was and of course once I got to the age of I don't know 10 or 11, I was pretty much on my own. My mother would be, she was an expert with learning, having learned in that school how to make clothing. She was an expert seamstress, dressmaker, actually a designer. And she
mm,
sewed for some very famous people. She even sewed for a couple of ebony models.
mhm.
And she made what is today called couture. So
Yeah.
she's busy doing that, bringing in money to keep the family going. And my father, he was an entrepreneur. He drove the truck, which was uh, from New Jersey to New York, and he worked in the garment district. And what it really was in the garment district in Manhattan, the designers would make clothing in large lots, and his trucking company would take those materials from New York to New Jersey, where they would be stitched together, and then back to New York and to Manhattan. So that was the kind of thing. And my mother and her sisters, when they first came from Georgia, they all got jobs in the garment district in New York City, and
Okay.
that's how my mother and father met. Him on the trucking, and my mother working in those garment factories there in New
Oh,
York
wow.
during World War II, where they survived because they had a skill. They were making army uniforms and things for the military, so they just survived the depression and thereafter, right up through World War II.
Mm,
So that basically was my. I was a child of the streets and learned a lot of things. Not all of them very good,
mhm.
but but that was my experience.
Central Ward, huh?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So, Grandma, what was the first time you heard about Al Islam, and what was the type of feeling that you had?
Okay, now Al-Islam, I heard the first time I heard was in it was in 1975. I mean, prior to that, it was the Nation of Islam,
Mm.
but there wasn't called Al-Islam at that time.
Okay, so
So
can you
I
tell me about that, please?
okay about the Nation of Islam.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, well, your granddad, of course, he was the first to accept the Nation of Islam, and
Mm.
he invited me to come and listen. And so I said, well, I'll come and listen, because it made such a drastic change in him. And I was
Mm.
very curious to know, what had changed him. So, and I went to hear, and everyone was very welcoming. The sisters, they were like, we were in Boston, away from family, and it was sort of like a sisterhood uh, that I felt I needed at that time.
Mm.
And so I listened, and I didn't accept it the first night, the first
Mm.
time. And then as we continued to attend, and we had to write our letter to get our X. And
Mm.
I did write my letter, and I was known as Esther 2X.
That's the 2X. Okay, two times.
So 2 times it was
Okay.
Esther in the nation. So I accepted that, and I immediately took uh, the 2 children, 3 children that I had in school and put them in the University of Al Islam,
Okay.
the
Mashallah.
University of Islam, and and became a very much active part of the community. And
Mm.
that's where I stayed learning more and more about nation building, about keeping the children mostly engaged and like the drills and all the activities that they had for the children, basically. I did so. I come from a family. My mother made clothes. She wasn't as efficient as my mother in law, but she made things by hand. She made
Mm.
our clothes by hand. And not only our clothes, our quilts. And we were like on the farm, basically. We
Yeah.
did gardening, and we had to pick our garden vegetables and fruits. And we were very close to nature and being organic. And like the houses were very far apart. So we walked a lot,
Mm.
to get to school. Everywhere we had to go, we walked because my mom and my dad had a driver's license. So
Yeah, y'all had shoes?
when we went to church or to school, we wore shoes.
Oh, okay. I know you's a country girl. But so quick question, Grandpa. What led you to find the nation since we're speaking about the nation? What led
Oh,
you to find that and how did it affect the black community?
okay. Well, my first experience with the Nation of Islam was going to hear in person the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I believe it was in 57. I think I was 14. That was the year that my wife had gone to Maryland to live with her sister for. But I remember that, and me and my boys, we used to hang out on the corner, and there was a empty store across the street there on South Orange Avenue, and these black guys rented it and turned it into a bakery. So we were very curious. We hadn't seen anybody like them, and they wore white shirts and ties, and they were operating this bakery. And they would come out sometime and talk to us on the corner and tell us about the Nation of Islam and the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And it was like, I don't know how to say it, but it was a mental bomb. It was a shock that we heard somebody say the white man was the devil and the black man was God. This was contrary to all the conditioning we had, cultural conditioning we had had from whites themselves in our school system and in the media, et cetera, et cetera. But let me digress for a minute. My wife and I met in ninth grade and became boyfriend and girlfriend and went through high school. And after that, I went to art school. And a year or so after graduating from art school, I was at the Newark Museum as an employee there, and I did some teaching. But I started a group with a couple of friends called the African Heritage Ensemble. So we knew about the Nation of Islam, but we kind of looked at it. We went into Afrocentrism. The dashikis and all of this. This was in the early '60s, and so we knew about the Nation of Islam, but we paid little attention to it. But to go back to where I was about these guys on South Orange Avenue in the bakery. So they would tell us about Elijah Muhammad. And, we at that point, we were still worshiping people like Roy Rogers and Tarzan and Superman, all these white, iconic superheroes and such. And this was a very foreign idea to us that the black man could actually be superior in any way. But it piqued our interest. And so I went as a youngster to hear the Honorable Elijah Muhammad there at the Scott's Auditorium. Never forget it, there on High Street. And I heard him speak. And I came home. I was fired up, man. I was I was Farad Muhammad and all the rest of it. But when I got home and I began to tell this to my parents and my siblings, I had two older brothers and two younger sisters, because the sisters weren't even hardly in the picture then. But my brothers and my mother and my father, they were in shock to hear me talk like that. And they ganged up on me and told me I was crazy, and Elijah Muhammad, who is he? And he's crazy, that there's no such thing, So that kind of put a damper on my interest in the Nation of Islam for the time being. But there was a man, my father we had a house, a 3-story house, 4 rooms on the first floor, 4 on the second, and 2 rooms in the attic. And he rented rooms out. He would rent rooms out upstairs to various characters. There were some real characters that came through there. I observed a lot of stuff. But anyway, there was a man who rented the top 2 floors. His name was he called himself Mr. Alexander. He was actually Mr. Alexander Bey. And he was a believer and a follower of Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple. And I always admired him because he was always clean and wore a suit and a tie. He was a very black man, very dark man. That man was like, midnight color. He was so dark. But he had a certain air about him, of air of confidence and superiority. And I knew about Noble Drew Ali and them because they had a place there on Springfield Avenue. That's where the Moorish Science Temple, what they call the Moorish Americans, that's where they started in Newark. That was their first temple. And I would go by there, and I think a couple of times it was located on top of a 5 and dime. That was just like a 5 and 10 store, like today's dollar store. It was kind of like that. But they had a place upstairs, and I would go up those stairs, and I never went in, but I would kind of sit by the door and hear what was going on, And Mr. Alexander also, I would take his linen up to him and go into the rooms where he lived. And he had this big flag on the wall with the star and the crescent, and that was the first time I had known anything about that. So we formed this African group called African Heritage Ensemble, and my wife was a very beautiful dancer, and we got married, and then shortly after, that was what we did. We toured the country and what have you, and ended up in Boston because that was where the agent that booked us.
The country, huh?
Oh yeah, with California, state of Washington, Florida, we went all over the country.
Is anybody you opened up for?
Well, what had happened was it was during the hot summers of the riots in Detroit and Newark, and because of that, there was a lot of money going to uh, black students on college campuses to
Mm.
try to damp down this. Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown, they was preaching black power, and whites wanted a way to pacify or calm this violence down. So there was a lot of money available, especially to black students on universities, and that
Mm.
was how they would hire us, book us to come and do performances. And I had an experience at the Newark Museum where I was working for a couple of years, and they had an extensive African collection of artifacts, drums, cloth, clothing, et cetera, et cetera. And I would go up and observe it and make notes. So I knew a little bit about African culture. And then the big thing came with Babatunde Olatunji and Ballet Africains. They came with the World's Fair there in Queens, New York. And for the first time, we actually saw African dance. And this went right in with the Black awareness and Black power movement. So we were very much a part of that. So what
Mm.
actually happened, and I'm getting long winded, but
It's all right.
once that died down, and there was the opportunities to perform and make money weren't so great. Or in between that, we got a job, my wife and I, in the summers at Cedar Point there at Sandusky, Ohio. Cedar Point today I think, is the biggest amusement park in America. It's tremendous. But then
Mm.
it was a nice little amusement park, and there was a guy called Jungle Larry there who had a pavilion, and you would pay get a ticket, and you walk through, and he had African animals, and he would import African animals from Africa. He also had a African animal farm there in Naples, Florida. But anyway, he hired us and built a stage to do a little show, and we did that for a couple of summers. But anyway, we ended up in Boston, and the money had dried up for that. And there I was without any real work experience per se, having done this for the past 5 years. And this was a very difficult time for us there in Boston. And I can remember, of course, at that time, I was an abuser and a user of substances,
Mm.
and drugs. Let's call it what it is. I used drugs, and I had hit a low point. I even tried driving a cab for a while. That didn't work out. So I was kind of wandering the streets, and we were trying to get an apartment. We had one, but it was in a bad area. We wanted to improve. And I was wandering the streets. I was at a very low point in my life. And I remember looking up there in Boston right off of Blue Hill Avenue in Roxbury. That was
Mm.
that Roxbury, Mass. And I looked up, I was on a certain street. I didn't even know the name of the street, but I saw a neon sign. It said Muhammad's Temple, number 11. And it was, a house. And I wandered up in there. And normally they wouldn't even let me in because the condition I was in, but they did because they knew I needed help. I was then what we call the dead, or the so-called American Negro. And that's who they wanted. And I went in and heard the talk. And that's when I joined the Nation of Islam. And it was probably the best thing I could possibly have done at that time, because I needed to be cleaned up, and they certainly did a job on that. FOI was no joke. They cleaned you up, believe me, and they disciplined you. You had to come in clean. They would tell you how many days you could wear a shirt. They would check your teeth, make sure your teeth were clean and your body was clean, and your mind, and they would put you to work, because I didn't have a work ethic. I had been an entertainer, I had been a so-called superstar. They brought me down to earth real quick.
So
But
any artists that people might know, the audience for them know, any artists that you opened up for in some of your
oh
shows?
yeah, we during that time with the ensemble, yeah, we opened up for James Brown there at Duke University. We did a couple of TV shows. I remember one of them was with BB King, and I think we did some shows there in Harlem, up near the Apollo. I think we were actually at the Apollo one time. Yeah, we were at the Apollo.
Mm.
Yeah, so it was lucrative. Yeah. Let me also mention at that time the whole concept of Elijah Muhammad burst on the scene, especially once Malcolm got there. He blew it wide open. And African Americans at that time, they did one of two things. They either turned to the church or they turned to some kind of black identity that they could find. Now, many of them, they they knew of the Nation of Islam, but a lot of young blacks, especially men, they couldn't. They had to have something different because they didn't want to give up smoking, they didn't want to give up drinking, they didn't want to give up white women, etc., etc. So this is when people like Ron Karenga, they're in California, they came up with this Kwanzaa concept
Mm.
and Uhuru. They had these were so-called alternatives that were more acceptable to blacks, and then and later on led this is what led into the Black Panthers, et cetera, et cetera. So it was something you just couldn't deny Elijah Muhammad and the teachings. You just couldn't. You had to do something. You had to make a move. You couldn't be rooting for Roy Rogers anymore. You know, you couldn't
Mhm.
be a Tarzan rooter anymore. So this was, and of course, we're talking the late 60s, early 70s, 71, 72, 73. And
Was
I
that was there
yeah,
any hostility like on in the streets of Central Ward? Like when you was on the streets, was there hostility between the whites and the blacks when you was growing up to have that kind of mindset, or was
no,
it
not really. But
mostly Elijah Muhammad?
that was not possible simply because by that time there were no whites in the Central Ward. It
Mm.
was all black, and you had, you had certain boundaries, certain streets you didn't cross because then there would be conflict. Yeah, and of
Is that
course,
you said like the Imperials? You
yeah,
said
I was
the
just going to say,
diamond.
yeah, there was with the Italians on in the North Ward. There was
Mm.
uh, the Anthony Imperiali, and yeah, my little gang had a clash in with them because there was a park called Branch Brook Park, and that
Mm.
was on right on that line between the Central Ward and the North Ward, and we would go to Branch Brook Park, but we would be many blocks away from our hood and very close to them. And a couple of times they approached us, and we had to run. We had to actually get
Mm.
out of there. Yeah,
What
there
was
was
the name of your gang?
my gang. My gang was called
Yeah,
the Junior Diamonds, and there was
Junior
a group of
Diamonds.
older fellows called the Diamonds. Yeah, we were part of the
Okay,
Diamonds,
gotta
basically
throw it
from
out.
South. Yeah, basically from the South Orange Avenue area, and there were the Mohawks, and there were the Dukes, and the
Mm.
Martians. The Pontiacs. There were quite a few gangs, but not. Don't get me wrong. These gangs were nothing like gangs today. Nobody
Mm.
had guns. Nobody even had even knives or anything like that. It was. If there was a conflict, it was usually just handled with fists or just talk or etc. But nobody got killed. There were no murders and no drive-bys or
Mm.
anything like that at that time. No.
So when you got official with the nation, which X did they give you?
Oh yeah, I went in and wrote my letter too, and I was given the designation of Thomas 8X.
Thomas
Because you
AX.
know how that works in any particular temple, Muhammad's temple. If there were one Andrew came in, he was Andrew X. The next one would be Andrew 1X, Andrew 2X, Andrew 3X, like that. So I was the eighth Thomas. So I became Thomas 8X.
Okay.
I must tell you though, I didn't. My experience with the Nation of Islam wasn't very long. It was about 3 years, off and on,
Mm.
and the reason it wasn't because by then in 1975, when we didn't get to Wadi Din Muhammad yet, but we will. But when he came in, by the time he came in, the nation was extremely corrupt. There was a lot
Mm.
of bad stuff going on, and there was a lot of extortion. There was a lot of fleecing. Members out of their money. It was a lot of bad stuff. It had lost its way, so to speak.
Mm.
And I ran into that, and I said, "Oh no, this is not it." But I'll let Monira take over now, and then we'll talk about the advent or the coming of Wadi Din Muhammad.
Okay. All right. So that was good right there. So basically, what you when I was gonna see with your time and experience with your children within the school of Al Islam, and did it affect Did you see it affect your children differently compared to maybe your Christian siblings' children? Was there a difference between your the decision, or was it just more so like of a better, clean life while within the Nation of Islam?
Okay. Yes, when we did land in Boston, uh, I put my children in, they called them free schools, Roxbury Free School, Highland Park Free School, and they were not public schools. So it was, the curriculum was quite different. Um, and but once the university opened and I did put them there, the teachings, your mom actually, she was she skipped a whole grade when she did go to public school. She stayed in a university school as long as, the grade up to fifth grade. And when she went to public school, she skipped the sixth grade and went right to
Mm.
the seventh grade. So she
Okay.
was very, smart. And the others, uh, they actually didn't get into public schools there that much. They were uh, then transferred to Cambridge French School. Two of my two oldest daughters, your mom and Shalazar, they were to Cambridge French School, which was an offshoot of Harvard University,
Mm.
and in
Okay.
Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point on, it was like I just searched for private schools and opportunities to put them to get the best learning possible.
And you
And
had them with the dance ensemble that you had. Did you still have the dance ensemble while in the nation, or was that
um,
before?
yes, when we moved back to Newark, and that is when they went to the Sister Clara Muhammad School. Well, by that time, your mom was, she graduated early. She was 16 and she graduated high school and she went to college. But the others went to Sister Clara Muhammad School in Newark. And I was able to form an exercise group with the sisters, the young adults. And from that point, we grew into doing dawah through dance interpretations.
Mm.
And I involved the children. And then we did a children's group. I had an adult group and a children's group. And we're known as the Al Umrani Cultural Ensemble.
Al Imrani,
Yes, Al Umrani.
Umrani.
Yes.
Okay, so around that area, I know Grandpa mentioned that there was riots around the whole country. So what was the riots based in Newark stemming from? And I understand they like tried to pacify people with grants and things like that. But where did it all stem from? What was going on at those times?
Okay. It was like we had a group, this is before we went into the nation.
Excuse me, somebody's at my door.
Oh,
No
okay.
problem.
Who do you think that is, Monira?
Orlando, maybe. Okay, I'll
All right, hold
continue.
on.
And
Go ahead.
yes, and we. Uh, uh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay.
We live, baby.
Glad I know. Yes.
No, we good. It's good. It's good. We growing this organic. We ain't gonna try to
Yes.
buy no subscribers. We doing this for the
Yes.
heart. It's for the
Yes.
future. You know.
And yeah, it was wonderful. Ask the question again because I really got this.
What was going on? The what was the all the commotion going on in that time period
Oh
in the
yes, during
'60s?
that
The
time.
rioting. Yeah.
Yes, we were at. I was conducting a class on Springfield Avenue in Newark, and then we heard that the police had arrested this guy and had him at the precinct and had beat him pretty badly, and
Mm,
and a group was forming, and they were trying to get to see him, and make
mm,
sure he was okay. and then they ran into some problems with the police, and we went down with the drums, and we were
Oh,
chanting and all that, and
yeah.
and
Wow.
and then like they would say, all hell broke loose.
Mm.
And next thing I knew, the police were attacking the citizens, and the citizens were throwing rocks at the police, and I was
Mm.
trying to get out from there, but your grandpa, he stayed, and he could tell you more.
Oh, we're talking about the riot of
The
Yeah,
riot.
like
'67.
what? Yeah, what stemmed from it
Yeah.
was 67. Yeah,
Well,
this.
67.
that summer, they called it the long hot summer, and it was um, there were no jobs. I mean, the African American community in the Central Ward, the South Ward, the East Ward, even parts of well, the West Ward, South Ward, East Ward, Central Ward, yeah. But all the African Americans, there were no job. People were just sitting around on their stoops, on their porches, uh, eating government cheese from the welfare. Everybody was on welfare. All the stores were owned by Jews. It was just terrible. And it was, and then there was police brutality. That you could be picked up and you could be beaten with no repercussions or no justice whatsoever. It was a horrible, horrible situation, and it was a powder keg, as it was described, and it was bound to explode sooner or later. So
Mm.
the situation arrived with this one cab driver who had been arrested by the police, who had been taken and just beaten to a pulp for no real reason. And they had him in the 14th precinct, which is there on 17th Avenue, which we used to live right across the street from it. Now, Baraka, at that time, we mostly called him Leroy Jones. We had a relationship. He had a place called Spirit House there on Sterling Street, where he would give talks, and they would have various, how can I say it? Yeah, I guess
Entertainers.
entertainers. And one of the people who would come by occasionally, and we knew very well, was Dick Gregory. He would come by, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, he would talk, and he wasn't he hadn't had no real fame then. He was a comedian, he was
You
on
sure
his
that's not my great great uncle? Y'all kind of look alike now a little
Dick Gregory,
bit.
yeah, yeah, Dick Gregory, and
Yeah.
uh, other people would come in from New York. I remember Sonia Sanchez, she was around there, and Melba Moore, she was around, and so Roy or Imam Mubarak, he would call me whenever they were having a rally or something like that. And he would say, Tom, come on down, bring your drums, and your dancers, y'all come on down. And we would do performances there too, also. So when the cab driver was being held in the precinct, he wanted to confront that precinct, and we formed a group right in front of it, and there was chanting. He had a bullhorn saying
Mm.
free him or whatever, and he called me, and me and two or three of my drummers, we came down and we were playing African drums, and the police were lined up in front of the precinct with their billy clubs.
Mm.
They didn't have their guns out, but they had their sticks, and they were just standing there. They weren't doing anything. So somewhere along the line, somebody must have gave an order: get these niggas out of here. And they charged us. They started swinging.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a guy standing next to me. I seen him get knocked out cold. And one of my drummers, he held his drum up, and the billy club hit the drum and broke the drum, and we scattered. But it was something that was so profound.
There's a bunch of dashikis everywhere, huh?
Yeah. Now, downtown Newark, and see, Newark is on the hill. It's part of the mountain. You going up when the Indians bought, there's first mountain and second mountain. So Newark is on the hill. You downtown, and then you go up higher, you're on the hill. So Springfield Avenue, it started there in the Central Ward, and you would go up the hill, and there were stores. The Jews had their stores on Springfield Avenue on each side. And I was up at the top, and you could see all the way down, maybe 12 blocks or so. And I heard a crash, like a window breaking, a big window. And then I heard it was like crash. And then it was like crash, crash, crash. It got closer and closer. All these windows were breaking, and
Mm.
people just came out of their houses into the streets and tore the stores up, all and looted everything. I think I even got a couple of pair of pants or something myself. But anyway,
Got a couple pits.
yeah, but it was yeah
Mm.
that and then the National Guard came in and all the firing, the shooting started.
So
And
within all the fire and shootings,
yeah,
was
the
it?
police were actually shooting. There were no snipers. They were shooting at each other. Didn't even know it.
Mm.
I'm surprised they didn't kill each other. But yeah, that was something. And of course, Detroit had gone off before that. L.A. and Detroit, and I think
Mm.
there was kind of riot in Chicago. But the Newark one was pretty bad. I don't know, something like 30, 40 people were killed in that riot
Mm.
at
So
that.
what do you think it was in that time period that set off those different cities, those
Well, it was
different
just it was just it was just the oppression and lack of opportunity, lack
mm.
of hope. When you're hopeless, you really don't care, and
Mm.
you will lash out and do pretty much anything because the condition that you're in is just no longer tolerable. You have a similar situation today with the people of Gaza in the Middle East. They are living in what is basically a walled-off prison. They have no chance, no hope for opportunity for education or a better standards of life or anything. So that's how you get a group like Hamas, a terrorist group, to take hold and be supported by them, because the hope or the lack of opportunity and vision for the future is just nil. So you go to extremes, and that's
Mm.
what happened back then. Yeah, it was an extreme response to oppression. But later on, that's when after that you got your first African American mayor, Ken Gibson, and money started to come in for various programs, community improvement programs, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah,
After the pushback, huh?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So can you tell me, both of you, with either or, can you tell me the experience of transferring from the Nation of Islam and the transference of Wafiuddin Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad's son? Or how did that go? Um, and before that, would you think if Malcolm was still alive, would you have followed him? Then after that, can you tell me the transference with Wafiuddin Muhammad, please?
It's a good question. A good question. Um, uh, let me say that we were there in '75 when Elijah Muhammad died. We were in the nation. We actually were in Chicago during the convention when Wadi D. Muhammad was officially made the successor and the leader. And I must tell you that myself, and there were many other FOI members like myself, who were totally disenchanted with the FOI. I had seen drug use, and I had seen a lot of stuff in the FOI. But when Wadi D, we were waiting for him to come, because it was known that he would be the inheritor of the leadership of the nation, and we just couldn't wait. And when he finally did take over, it was a breath of fresh air. You know, he took the chairs out of the temple, and we began to sit on the floor, and we began to learn prayers, and we began, because as FOI, you always required to own a copy of the Holy Quran, but we never read it. We only read from the Bible. Elijah Muhammad only taught from the Bible. But we all had Qurans, but we didn't understand it. So he brought, he introduced the greatest uh, conversion of Muslims, hundreds of thousands of Muslims from the Nation of Islam to what they call, quote unquote, Orthodox Islam. And that was a greater conversion actually than the Prophet himself. He never converted that many people at any one time. Uh,
Mm.
it was a miracle. And as
So
far
yeah.
as Malcolm is concerned, I do believe that I don't. You say, would you have followed Malcolm or W.D. Muhammad? I do. I probably would have gone with W.D. Muhammad simply because he emphasized Islam and nothing else, really.
Mm.
Malcolm was actually a black nationalist. He did not. He went to Mecca. He took the Shahada, etc. But he did not have an in-depth knowledge of Al Islam. He was a Pan-Africanist and a black nationalist. He wanted to bring the nations of Africa together, but not based on an Islamic uh, uh, foundation, because he just didn't have that kind of a background. Most of the knowledge that and especially in the beginning, before he went to Africa and toured the Middle East, he had got it from W.D. Muhammad. And the two, I'm sure, would have worked together very closely, and they would have been absolute allies in the advancement of the cause and improvement of life for the African American community.
Okay. Thank you right there. So you guys knew that he was going to be the one, the inheritor of it. But what would you say? What was the spark? I'm trying to find the root of the Black Power movement, in your opinion, of the whole, even the dashiki, like you said, either you went Nation of Islam or you went dashiki. You know, what was the root of all this change, this transmutation?
Well, yeah, the root was the teachings of Farad Muhammad.
Mm,
That was the root, because prior to that, I mean, you had Marcus Garvey. He had a little piece of it. Then you
mm,
had Noble Drew Ali, and he had a certain aspect. Noble Drew Ali and Elijah Muhammad were both students of Farad Muhammad. Farad
mm,
Muhammad had influence on both of them. They just went slightly in different direction, but the teachings of Farad Muhammad was the catalyst for all of it. He recognized the sickness in the African American psyche, and the sickness was that the worship of white people, when they put that white Jesus up there with the blonde hair and the blue eyes, and you saw your oppressor and he had blonde hair and blue eyes, well, that was the same as God being your oppressor. So you were reluctant to fight back or to attack a person who looks like God, because he's God. So when Farad came, it was like a shock treatment. He just used simple reverse psychology. No, that white image that you see is not God. The real God looks like you. And that was
mm,
profound. That was totally profound. That that
mm.
that that just changed everything. No, you're not inferior. You are superior, which is not
Mhm.
true, of course. There's no human being is superior to another.
Only the taqwa, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
But
but he
mhm,
recognized what needed to be done. We needed that shock treatment. We needed that medicine. When you take a strong medicine, it doesn't taste good and it may have
mhm,
side effects, but we needed that medicine to tell us that we were as good or better than what we actually always had been taught and believed that we were, because we had swallowed that inferiority pill hook, line, and sinker. We had just
mhm,
that's what we were. We didn't look at ourselves as being equal to Caucasians in any way. So he just threw a bomb on that and said, "Oh no, that's the devil. You are the
mhm.
God," and that just shook up everything.
So from Thomas 8x and Esther 2x,
Yes.
you changed it onto Monira and Tasir. Can you explain those two names in our closing? Those some beautiful names right there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Munira, of course, she is a light, and I think she couldn't have picked a better name for herself, because she is the light of our family. She is a light almost, and she was a light at Hampton University when she worked there. She was a
Mm,
light in the high schools. She is a light, so that's perfect. The Nur and Munira is the light, and so she chose that name. Now, actually, in Islam, a husband and wife would not have the same last name. Uh,
mhm,
when two Muslims get married, the woman, the female, she keeps her name. Islam, you don't change your name to your husband's name, because
mhm,
you're not related to him. He's not a member of your father. He's your husband. You keep your name. But in our case, since we were both changing our name from a slave name to an Islamic name, we chose the same name. And then,
mhm,
and in Islam, as we have come along over the years, it's an evolving situation. You learn, and you get better and better as you learn more and more. And for me, Taswir means an artist, and Abdul-Musawir, that's one of the attributes of Allah, which some people say it's the bestower of forms. Some say it's the designer. Some say its meaning is designer, bestower of forms. Yeah, those two are very, very prominent. Architect, that's another one for Al Musawa, which is one of
Like an architect.
yeah, architect,
Design.
designer, bestower of forms. Yeah, these are some of the translations of the meaning of Al Musawa, which is one of the attributes of Allah. So there's where we get the two names, Monira and Tasir.
And I did choose my name because not that Esther was a bad name, it was a good name actually, but I wanted to become more than just an Esther. I wanted to become an enlightenment. I wanted to become the radiant, the one who was intelligent, who want to shine the light on others, to enlighten others. So I did keep my middle name, May, and because of family ties, my family on my mother's side all called me May, while on Taswir's side, they called me Esther. So I was never really called one name, you know. And so I kept the May. And I had one of my nieces tell me, she said, I want to call you May because my dad named me after you. So I said, okay, then. I said, you could call me Aunt May.
Well, I think Esther means star anyway. That's ironic. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah,
That
she
it
was
means.
Esther was an African queen. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she was an African queen,
Yeah.
and she's in the Bible. And
Mhm.
very, very prominent figure actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And you still do your painting, Grandpa?
No, well, up until recently, I've just recently kind of given it up because of my eyesight isn't what it used to be. But my son, your uncle Ahad, he's taking it over. He's a good artist. But there's so many things. Maybe we need to have another session because a lot of things. You know, I met personally two Hall of Fame baseball players. I met Jackie Robinson. I had lunch with Jackie Robinson, and
Oh wow.
and I met and very personally met with Ray Dandridge Sr., who was also in the big league Hall of Fame. He was,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, I was friends with one of his sons, and I used to go to his house, and his wife would fix us lunch and stuff. And also, I became a fencing instructor. Uh, yeah,
That's what my mom did fencing. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
she liked fencing. Yeah, so many things, as well as a teacher and a cab driver, and just a lot of stuff. Oh, I didn't even mention U.S. Airways.
Oh, but yeah.
I
Yeah.
got to tell you a quick story about that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It was during the time I was in the in the Nation of Islam, in the FOI, and I had been driving a cab, and it got dangerous because some people tried to rob me, et cetera, et cetera. So I gave that up, and I applied for unemployment. This was in Boston. So I got unemployment. I was collecting unemployment, and I was working for a Muslim brother who did like construction work, and he would pay me under the table. So I was doing well. I was getting unemployment, and I was had this little job with Brother Hairston. So anyway, when you get on unemployment, you have to go in there and you have to prove to them that you're looking for work, in order to get
Yeah.
that check. So that was the day I had to report. So I went, to the caseworker, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh," she said, you're different," because I had the shirt and tie on. I had Muhammad Speaks newspapers, in the car and everything. But so this, they had to interrupt my day of making dawah for the Nation of Islam to go to this unemployment thing. So I went. She said, usually these guys come in here and their fly is open and they look all bummy. She said, I got this job down here. And she reached down into one of her lower drawers and she said, now you look good. You have a shirt. She said, you take this over to the airport. Allegheny Airlines is hiring. You tell them that I sent you. You take this over. So I went over. they're not going to hire me. I had no accident, but I had to do it because I had to prove to get my check. So I went over, and sure enough, I got hired at Boston Logan Airport by Allegheny Airlines as a customer service agent. And that was the beginning of a 31-year career with in the airlines. I
Mm.
was at I was at Logan. I worked the ticket counter and on the ramp at Logan for Allegheny, which later became U.S. Airways. No, it became what
Yeah.
was it? Yeah, U.S. Airways. And then after that, it was what it
No,
was.
Piedmont.
No, it wasn't Piedmont. They bought Piedmont.
Oh,
It was Allegheny.
and then it
Yeah,
came to
U.S. Airways, and then it became
America,
just U.S. Air, and then
Okay, yeah.
yeah,
American.
then finally with American. But anyway, yeah, I worked at Logan International in Boston for 5 years, and that's when we moved back to Newark, and I worked at Newark Airport uh, for 5 years, and then
Mhm.
finally migrated south here to Norfolk, Virginia, transferred, and I was at Norfolk International Airport. I worked there for 21 years. So it was 31 years with the airlines, and that was basically how I was able to buy a home and to do the best I could to take care of it.
Mashallah. So y'all just did a whole lot of traveling, huh?
Yeah,
Oh,
there was some
yes.
Lot of
traveling. There was some
Yes.
traveling. Yeah.
spreading the light. That's what's up.
And we didn't get a chance to talk about how we met and got married and all that. But
I mean, we could talk. You could go ahead right now. I know y'all
uh,
met in middle school. Y'all said.
yeah,
Ninth grade. At that time, it was called junior high.
Mm.
See, Newark had a different system. It was 6 years. See, it was kind of messed up. But anyway, my school was 8 years in elementary school. Then you went 1 year to transition and what they call junior high school, and then 3 years of high school. So I actually entered high school as a sophomore, not a freshman. And on her side, it was 6 years, and like it is today, it was 6 years, and then middle school was 3 years. Uh, I think 3 years or 2 years. Huh?
it was three.
It was 3 years. Then you went to
6 to 9.
6 to 9, and
Then
then
the high school
yeah.
was 3.
So we met at age we met at age 14. We were both 14, and I think maybe a year later we became like boyfriend girlfriend, and got married at age 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been married now for 62 years.
But how in school? What was the first time y'all saw each other in school? How did that go?
Well,
that was funny.
What happened,
Because
Grandma? Go ahead, tell
well,
us.
I
I
saw her.
was
Let
I
me.
was
No, I saw
No,
her
go ahead.
first.
Go ahead.
She
Go ahead.
gave
Let
me.
her tell it, Grandpa.
No,
Go
but
ahead.
I'll give her a chance. She never even knew I existed, but I was. It was in ninth grade, and we were in that school in Robert Treat, what they call Robert Treat Junior High, and that was the first time when we changed classes. You had to change classes, and she was coming up the stairs, and I was going down, and I saw her, and it was just, I don't know, it was just, I was mesmerized. She was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and I didn't know what to do, and
Yeah.
I would wait for her every day, and finally I did see her one day, and she never even knew who I was,
And
and
we gonna have some babies.
and then,
Yeah.
and then I think one day I actually stopped her and I kissed her. It's a little quick kiss,
You
and I
stopped her and you kissed her?
yeah, and I said something like, "We have to stop just looking at each other," and she was in shock. What the hell is Bill
Oh
talking about?
yeah? You was
So I
smooth
let her
like
tell you.
that?
yeah,
How'd that go,
right.
Grandma? It went like
Yeah.
that?
Yes. Well, my cousin, like I said, my mom raised us, and we were all in the same grade. And he found out she was my cousin,
Yeah, she was in my homeroom, her cousin, Mary.
and
Yeah.
Okay.
so she told me this guy wanted to meet you because he said he'd been looking at you, and uh, he wanted to know you. So I'm looking, what he looked like, and so, when we would pass in the gym, changing classes, I was looking at the wrong guy, right? And so then one day I was in class, and we had like the water fountain, and the doors always open to the classroom, and he went by the water fountain, he like beckoned for me to come out, and I went out to get a drink of water, and he kissed me real quick and ran down the stairs. I still didn't see him.
Oh,
I was
oh,
like,
he didn't say, "Oh, y'all gotta stop looking at each other." He didn't say
yes,
that.
and we can stop looking at each other and get together. I never saw you before. What is this? But yeah, that was the cute part of it. After that, we used to go skating and, hang out together at house parties and stuff like that. But yeah, it was quite an experience meeting him. He was slippery.
Yeah, he got you out there, caught you slipping, huh?
Yes, yes. But anyway, that was a highlight.
That's what's up. That's
Well,
what's
I
up.
often tell people, they say, how did you manage to stay together so long? And I often tell them, I said, I think there's something to be said about cultures who pair youngsters up at an early age. They don't necessarily marry them, or there's no physical thing going on, but they say, well, you're betrothed to so and so, and you guys, you'll be married at 10 or 12 or whatever in the future. But I think there's something, because at that point you begin to form a bond, and you actually become a part of each other's lives as you are developing as a human being. So I think this 5 years that we had being together before we got married, we had become part of each other's lives. So when difficult times came during our marriage, and there were difficult times, and no marriage is a piece of cake. It's not. There are difficulties that will inevitably happen. I think having had that early bonding was very important in helping you to overcome the stress and the differences and the storms that come during any marriage, especially in the earlier years of a marriage. So I
Mhm.
think that was Allah brought us together early in life. And you could
Mhm.
almost say from the age 14 on, you could almost say we grew up together, actually, because
Yeah,
we weren't
that's good.
developed, adults, and we developed as adults together.
Okay, wow, mashallah. That was beautiful right there. I gotta give a round of applause for that one. And look at y'all, still strong.
Yeah, we're
Still
hanging in
We're
strong.
there.
hanging in there.
Yeah,
Yes, indeed.
alhamdulillah,
With the will
alhamdulillah.
of Allah. I'm taking Arabic classes. He was teaching me at one time. Now I'm teaching
Well,
him.
she's way past what she's good.
Yeah.
She has
So
her. I never took a class, so maybe I should have, but I'm not a good. I don't learn like a lot of people. Like, for instance, I can't take notes. They ask you
Mhm.
to take notes a lot. I cannot take notes. When I try to take notes, I can't hear. I lose what I'm hearing. I just
Mm,
learn by ear, and try to put it into my memory.
okay.
I've always been that way. I always learn in a different way. Because when
Okay.
grammar school, I was uh, I was robbed. I went to grammar school, and in the second, third grade, or whatever it was, the teacher would come around and she would check your work, whatever she told you to do, and she would come to my desk, and my book would just be full of drawings. I had nothing to do with the lesson, and they would look at it and they would say, "Okay." So what they did was, I was like the artist, and they would, in Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter, I would do the illustrations, the elaborate drawings on the blackboards,
Mhm.
and they would rent me out. They would say, "You want Tom McRae to come over?" Yeah, they'd send me over to another teacher and do hers, and they weren't teaching me nothing, and that went on all through grammar school. So when I got to
T
high
Mac.
yeah. So when I got to high school, the same thing happened. Instead of being in class, I was sent to the art room, and I was sent to work on the yearbook, and I was in the choir, in the glee club, and stuff like that. So I missed out on a whole lot of academics, math, etc. But I have my own way of doing math. I do it in my head.
Thank God for
And
So
I have an excellent handwriting too, and I
mm.
write, but I can't spell for nothing. Spell, yeah, no.
Think I
so
spelled.
what was it? How'd you? What was it like working at the North Museum though?
Oh, that was cool. That was quite an experience also. In my third year of art school, which I majored in fine arts, painting, sculpture, drawing, one of my
Mm.
teachers, they asked when they sent to the art school, they said, "Do you have a student who could come down? We have an opening, and do you have a student that would be, you would recommend to come in and work in the exhibits department where they put the museum exhibits on, putting stuff in the cases and making labels and stuff like that, doing a little mural work, etc." So yeah, so one of my teachers said, "Yeah, I'll send you a student," and they sent me over, and I got hired by the Newark Museum, and then I did that for about a year and a half or 2 years, and then I went into the Junior Museum, where I would give talks to elementary school kids that would come in, and I also operated was part of the zoomobile. I used to take a van out that had snakes and turtles and reptiles and stuff like that, and I would go to schools. I was an artist in resident for Newark too. Uh, I was hired to go to high schools and take that art teacher's classes for a day and do demonstrations. I did that at West Side and Weequahic High School. I remember going
Mm.
there,
A
and
week way. Okay.
yeah, a few other schools. Yeah, so yeah, that experience at the Newark Museum was very interesting. But at that time, I wanted to be an entertainer, and I wanted to
Yeah.
play drums and do the dance, and so that's why I
Yeah.
left the museum.
You did that. You got out there and did
Yeah, I
that.
went out there and got it
I
done.
just find it ironic with all the riots and things going on that they start shelling out money. It's kind of
Yeah,
similar like today, when even with the George Floyd issue, they started, with the unemployment money, it was skyrocketing and
yeah,
giving
I
out
got it. Yeah,
stimulus
they
and
gave
stuff
me
to make
10,000.
people.
Yeah, they gave me $10,000,
Mm.
and I bought very expensive conga drums and other supplies, and rented a place, and had a studio. So yeah, that money was there for a very short time. Very short time.
Yep, that sound about right. Well,
One shot deal.
thank y'all so much. Is anything you wanted to add on while we closing, Grandma? Or you good? This is a wonderful
Um,
conversation we had.
yes, I think it's very good to just go back, you know, and the long terms. I mean, I did end up after we had 7 children. I did go back. I went to college. I got my
She did.
bachelor's degree in business organization and management, and I went on to get my master's in counseling, community, and agency,
Mhm.
and that was from Hampton University. And I also attended Old Dominion University for advanced counseling. So it did come in handy. I was an entrepreneur and ran a beauty salon across from Hampton University and hired
Mhm.
students who were,
Oh yeah,
you know,
Elegance in Motion. Is that it?
elegance in motion. Yes.
Oh, then you have what's that DJ Envy down there? It's called
Yes. He
was
was
Red
there.
Man there? Was Buster
Yeah.
Rhymes? It was a couple
And
of people.
also
Oh, they all used to come through there. Yeah.
Biggie Small, all of them. Yes, they all came through. And
Biggie.
Biggie, yes, I have pictures
Oh
with
wow.
your Art Shalazar, with
Yeah, I
them.
know Shasha, I know.
And
Yeah.
she
Yes,
gave opportunity to a lot of young people for employment, there.
We're gonna have to get her up here on Freedom Boulevard.
Yeah.
Talk about
yes,
her black owned business.
yes, yes.
Yeah, inshallah.
I'd just like to close with the contemporary situation that we see and observe today with the advent of Wahid Muhammad and the impact of his teachings and the legacy that he left. Because you see, he had many students and he had pockets of students, and he would give each of them something a little bit different. And we see the fruition or the fruits of this in today's organization. The followers of Imam Wadatli Muhammad, and it's not an organization as such with a president or a lead. It's a conglomeration of masjids all over the country. I would venture to say there's at least 200,000 members, at least 200,000.
How
Which
does
if you,
one get in contact with the community for our viewers,
yeah,
community with Walter Muhammad?
yeah. Well, you being in Irvine, I wouldn't know exactly, but um, I'm sure that there is at least one masjid, if not in Irvine, somewhere near, that is a masjid which is part of the movement or the followers of W.D. Muhammad. Now, they have an Islamic Learning Institute that is really profound. They're teaching Arabic language. Many of his students have gone overseas to Syria, to Turkey, to Iraq, to Sudan, to Egypt, and have come back fluent in Arabic and in the and most of all fluent in the Quranic Arabic, which is very important. And so this movement, Houston is fabulous, one of the fabulous centers of this organization. New York, of course, and Chicago, of course, and L.A. Florida is has a very strong movement. We pray Juma with an imam from W.D. Muhammad's community online every Friday. He's in Jacksonville, Florida.
What is do you know the website just for our viewers to
We can
know?
get it. We'll get it to you. We'll get you
Yeah,
that
he's
information.
there on YouTube.
Yeah, Abdullah.
Yeah.
And then there's
so
the
StreamYard.
most profound and prolific of them all is a man called Benjamin Bilal. And Benjamin Bilal and the language or the science of Nunetics.
Nunetics. Okay.
Nunetics. You got to check it out. He is a former student of W.D. Muhammad, and W.D. Muhammad put him on the road to what he
I believe that's on YouTube, right? I
Yeah.
heard about that. He has some interesting
Benjamin Bilal.
breakdowns with the
So we
Harut.
see today a tremendous movement, which, in my opinion, this is just me, but it puts to shame the so-called madhabs of the Middle East. Because what is the result of this? Look at the Muslims in the Middle East today, how backward. Look at Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia.
Clubbing out there, and
Oh yeah,
they got the
bringing the
twerking.
wrestlers in,
Yeah.
bringing women in there. And we see
hashish.
them fighting each other, killing each other. So obviously, there's something wrong with their Islam. Something very much wrong, very wrong. Africa it's a mess. It's a mess. So I think we have the light has finally the light has finally come here in the West, and it has risen in the West. And I think the most profound and prolific and beneficial to mankind Islam is right here in America amongst the followers of W.D. Muhammad. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank y'all so much for coming to Freedom Boulevard Studios. It's a wonderful production.
All right.
Inshallah, we'll talk to y'all soon.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Now,
Walaikum
one more,
assalam.
my last thing. Do we have this? We don't have to do this again, do we? We have it?
Oh no, we got it now. We got it now.
Okay.
We got it now.
All right.